All right, I got check marks. Everything looks good. I got to do the thing with the Instagram. Takes a few seconds. I don't know. Do you do Instagram Live?
We have not, but it's on the list.
Yeah, I do it now, but it's a little bit of work. All right, here we go. And I see people piling in. We've got Giuseppe Grammatico here. We're going to be talking about ethical franchising, and we're going to start as soon as our intro has rolled. Let's let her rip. I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses while controlling risk. So, if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So, be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win. All right, Giuseppe, how you doing today?
Doing very well. How's it been? It's been a while.
It's been a little while. It
Yeah.
is not your first time on the channel, but it might be the first time for some viewers. Why don't you just take a couple minutes and give us a background on yourself and what you have to do with franchising?
Awesome. I appreciate that. So Giuseppe Grammatico, that's a mouthful. We go by G or GG. Yeah, was a unhappy corporate executive living here in New Jersey. Was looking for something else. We grew up a family owned the restaurant. Realized that wasn't the direction I wanted to move in, and started exploring franchising for something better, something I can control. And it's been almost 20 years since I opened my first franchise, and getting rid of the 5 hour plus commute. And today, after being inspired by the coach that helped me find my first franchise, I became a coach many moons ago, helping individuals do the same thing, figuring out if a franchise and as well as a business is the right fit for them.
Awesome. And so today you basically take inquiries from people that want to explore the idea of getting into a franchise. You help them explore different brands and find the right match. And just before we hit play or record or broadcast, live, I guess is a button. You and I were just chit chatting a little bit because you sort of operate from a catalog of franchise brands, and it's not an exhaustive catalog of every brand out there. It's a little bit discerning. You want to give some ideas about what goes into putting certain brand names within your offering, because I think it's going to lead very well into the topic of today's discussion.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we there's about 4,000 franchise brands available in the US and Canada, which are the two countries that we cover. And do we work with every brand? No. We do have full-time team that goes in that will pre-screen companies. So they're looking for track record. They're looking for, they interview management, they interview franchisees, they review the franchise disclosure document. And this is a pre-screen. This is simply a way to really bring the list down to a more manageable list. Some brands, decide to do all the development on their own and in-house, and they will not utilize a franchise consultant or broker. But we work with some of the top brands out there that have availability, that have room for growth, and have systems that could really help the franchise owners.
Back a couple months ago, actually, it was in the summer. I had Megan Rosen on the channel. We did a
Mm,
live stream. It was about growing a new franchise brand, challenges and opportunities. She was talking with us about a new restaurant chain called Beefaroo's.
right.
And one of the things that came up in our conversation was this term, ethical franchising. And then later, when I was having a little email exchange with you, it kind of came up again, and I asked you about it. You had done a couple of episodes of your own podcast about
Right.
ethical franchising, and I thought, this might be something that we could like double down on, expand a little bit into a conversation.
Sure.
Um, d- can you describe what the term ethical franchising means?
Absolutely. Yeah. We had Aaron Harper, CEO of Rolling Suds, responsible franchising, ethical franchising. It all really means the same thing. And really what it comes down to is what's the responsibility of the franchisor? And the franchisor really has to have a clear idea on who would be a great franchisee. So they have this avatar. And now, the established brands really nailed it. The emerging brands are figuring out, sometimes there are going to be changes as to who's kind of their ideal franchisee, but really figuring out, okay, who is the ideal franchisee? Not necessarily experience, but they're looking for these transferable skill sets. For example, sales, marketing, management. Management's a big one. A lot of people have great management experience, but no sales experience. So not necessarily the experience in the industry, but the actual transferable skill set. And really just, having a two-way conversation, figuring out in the very beginning if that individual could be a good fit for the brand. And there's a, very lengthy due diligence process, from exploring and talking directly with the franchisor, with speaking equally as important with existing franchisees, which is an area I see a lot of people kind of glance over and say, yeah, I spoke with one or two. No, you need to really speak with multiple franchisees, and then finally meeting the franchisor in person, not asking them about specific questions about, what the royalty is. That's all provided to you, but kind of, let me meet the captain steering the ship. Where is this business going? Why should I invest in your brand? Those are the questions you're going to ask at discovery. But a responsible franchisor understands that, many people, maybe it's their first time venture, clear on who the ideal fit is, providing them all the information, because ultimately this is going to be on average a 10-year agreement between the franchisee and the franchisor. So being open and honest, but also when I say honest, if that person isn't a good fit, bringing it up early in the process, not dragging it through to say,
Okay.
you need sales experience. You really don't have it. How do we get past this?
So everything that you're saying right now just kind of makes sense. Like obviously a franchisor would like to have a unit holder who is going to be the right fit and be successful. So let me ask you the opposite question.
Sure.
What does unethical franchising look like?
Unethical franchising it's, not every brand is built the same. I wish to say that, but to set up a franchise, you get that FDD, that legal document in place. And, that document is great, but not following, what's promised in that document. So, you're going to be paying typically, in some cases, it's going to be a flat royalty, but usually it's a percentage. 5 to 10% would be an average. And, some are going to be higher, some are going to be less. And you're going to pay a percentage of revenue, and that's your royalty. In return for that, you're getting certain support, and that franchisor really has to follow through with that support. With a franchise, you're making an upfront investment, and then you're paying this royalty. So they need to follow through with their promise. So getting you up and running, and more importantly, continuing to support you, and that's key. I always tell people in due diligence, you want to make sure that franchisor really is putting in the time and speaking with the franchisees to say, hey, how has your experience been? The $1 million question, knowing what you know today, would you do it all over again? That's crucial, because that's where you'll find out, like, yeah, you know what, may have gone a different direction, or it was a little rocky to start, but they've kind of, figured things out. But the franchisor really has
And I
to
guess I guess
follow
this
through.
is where the interviews with current franchisees comes to play, because you could read in the FDD, these are the things we're going to deliver to you. But then when you interview actual franchisees, you can say, hey, can you tell me what this looks like? Are they really doing this for you? What does the support look like? How long does it take for you to get a call back if you have a problem? Like you can actually measure the degree to which the promises are being kept with these other people.
100%, right? Because it's going to tell you kind of what the guidelines are, but you want to make sure that they're actually following through, with the promises, with whatever has been included in there. Another thing to consider, today is December 9th. The FDD that you're reading, that usually the information is as of December 31st of 2023. So
Right.
in speaking with the franchise owners, you're capturing another close to, just say, 11 months of data, and figuring out, hey, in these past 11 months, information that's not reflected in the FDD and the financials, have things changed? Have your costs gone up? Has your profit margin, have they shrunk? Have they increased? So you can gather that information. But yes, absolutely, you want to spend equal amount of time in this stage, and this is the stage that is commonly forgotten for whatever reason.
Yeah, like I've seen a lot of stuff over the course of the years, and what what you're saying about, making sure that the person you choose is the right fit. I remember back in my business broker days, I worked a little bit with an emerging franchise brand. They had 3 or 4 locations when I met them, and they were growing quickly. They were opening up all over the place. And they had a good model that worked in their one sort of headquarter location. And then they opened up other stores which looked great but weren't necessarily performing. But based on how great these initial franchise locations looked, other people signed up and paid a franchise fee. And they really were just accepting anyone who was willing to write the check. And in short order, after about 2 years, some of the initial locations started to close. And it really sort of highlighted the riskiness of the model, that they had not actually proven that their model was a successful one that could really be transferred into other new markets.
Yes, I mean, with every franchise has to start somewhere, and you're absolutely right. It may work in one market and not others. So, with certain franchises, some will keep it national, right, the entire U.S. and Canada. Others will just keep it on the West Coast. You see certain restaurant chains that only are on the coast, East Coast or West Coast. So, with an emerging brand, you're going to have less data points. You're going to have, okay, we have one corporate owned or two corporate owned stores. This is the revenue, and then they're always going to be adjusted, or you always want to ask for that, I should say, making sure they back out the royalty and saying, okay, this is what these locations have done. You should have, right? It's kind of like, you have the advantage of, we've learned everything the hard way. So you're not going to have certain costs. We've already figured out the marketing. But yes, in any franchise you look at, you need to research the local competitors in your market. Is this something? Mosquito spraying is a perfect example. The weather, it may not work in every environment. So if you don't have a humidity or mosquito issue, obviously that brand may not do as well as the mosquito situation we have here on the East Coast. So you definitely want to look at the industry itself, making sure there's enough demand. Contact competitors, both franchise and non-franchise. There's going to be some mom and pop, but absolutely. And again, you'll have some more risks with the emerging brands because of less data points. So go to some competitors that are maybe a little bit more established. The emerging brands will have more territory for you to choose from. If you have this expansion strategy, the established brands, there's going to be less there. You may have to look into a different market, maybe a market you don't live in. But these are things that I always encourage all the franchisees to look into and speak with the existing business owners in their area.
Victor's tuning in from Nottingham, UK, says, I've given you a like. And if you're enjoying the show so far, please do hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, you should be. I mean, come on, click subscribe. And if you think this show or the content I create would be helpful for someone else, please share it. I did some research just before you tuned in here, Giuseppe, and I found this article. This is from Forbes magazine, and it's from 2022, but it's entitled "The Six Cornerstones of Ethical Franchising," and the author, Fiona Simpson, goes through, and I'll just read the headlines here. It says that the business model must be a proven one. It must be a profitable one. The business model must be transferable and teachable. The franchise model must value training and support, and the franchise agreement must be fair and reasonable for both parties. And the franchise agreement should be entered into by both parties with the benefit of full and open disclosure.
Right.
Now, that all sounds great, but one of the issues that came up when I was listening to your podcast about issues between franchisees and franchisors is what happens when these franchises, the franchisors, change hands? What happens if the company is sold? And I think some of the biggest stories I've ever heard that are kind of on the bad side are when these particularly evil sounding organizations called private equity groups buy these franchise organizations and start adjusting everything they can, of course, to squeeze maximum profitability out of there. So what defense does anyone have, if any, against becoming involved in a franchise brand that could end up in the hands of a less charitable or generous owner?
Yeah. So the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, which by the way contains the franchise agreement, because I get that question a lot. So the franchise agreement is within the FDD, is going to outline everything as far as rights and fees. They'll have what do you call it? Audited financials as well. So the financials, and I always advise everyone as an added layer of protection, hire a franchise attorney, an attorney that specializes in franchising that can review the document with you. I hired an attorney. I didn't understand the legalese, the wording. Is this normal? Is it not? Do most franchise agreements read the same? Private equity, it's been very common with private equity coming in. And, with the intention of, we're going to bring in additional capital, we're going to bring in additional resources. And sometimes it's private equity coming in and, they kind of take over the complete operation. We've seen it where the CEOs stay on the board. So they're kind of in the day-to-day overseeing, maybe not doing the calls with candidates, but they're overseeing things. They're making kind of final decisions along with the PE firm. It may be a partial buyout, just like with Jersey Mike's, local company here to Blackstone, that their CEO is staying on board to make all those decisions. So the FDD will outline exactly what's there. We can't predict with a PE firm when or if that will happen. Maybe the goal isn't there, but it just there's just such a great opportunity, and that franchisor does decide to sell. We've seen some great situations where they brought in new CRMs, marketing, AI, and just the capital resources to really help each and every one of their franchisees. And on occasion, you hear a not so great story where they're really trying to cut the expenses. But the FDD will outline exactly what can or cannot be done, especially since you are signing this anywhere from 5, 10 to up to 20-year franchise agreement. As I mentioned, the average is going to be 10 years. So the franchise attorney, to a question to be asking in the review is, what happens in the event of change of ownership? What section kind of outlines that, and they can go through the questions to ask the franchisor, and if that's going to be an issue, and that's a hard pass on the brand.
Well, I think it's great that you bring up the franchise agreement, because I am not a franchise attorney, but I have read many franchise agreements, and it's amazing some of the stuff you find in them as a layperson or maybe an experienced business person. But I've seen in some of these franchise agreements, basically like an obligation on the part of the franchisee to basically buy or subscribe to any kind of services that the franchisor may introduce in the future. Like some of them can be very open ended. And I think this has to be part of your analysis as a potential investor, just to say,
Right.
what would happen if a different owner came in and had a much different philosophy. I've had experience before with franchises where there was a certain, fee structure in place.
Right.
But then this one I'm thinking about, they decided to bring in an in-house magazine, and they were then decided to force the franchisees to buy a copy of this magazine at like $5 each for each customer they were serving, essentially introducing a new cost structure to the franchisees with no compensating increase in prices or anything like that. So it literally just came out of the franchisee's pocket. And they pointed to the franchise agreement, which said that any future introduced services had to be subscribed to by the franchisees. So this is important. The other thing that you brought up was about the financial statements. And so when you said there's audited financial statements within the FDD document, and this is the franchise disclosure document, you're talking about financial statements of the franchisor.
Correct.
And a lot of the people that I've worked with, they kind of glance over it. They don't really know what they're looking at. Everyone pay attention to the financial statements of the franchisor, because it can really give you an idea of how solid a footing this franchisor is on. There was a video that I made on the topic of a chain here in Canada called Great Canadian Bagel. And one of the issues that I found when I was looking at their FDD at the time, and this was about 10 years ago, so this is
Mhm.
quite some time ago, um, they were collecting two kinds of fees: a franchise fee and a marketing fee.
Mhm.
And then the financial statements for the marketing account were included in the FDD as well. And what the marketing fund was doing is it was investing money in buying basically debt for the franchisor. So the marketing fund was lending money to the franchisor because the franchisor was running a deficit.
Right.
And, like, I pointed this out to my client, and I showed them in the financial statements where this was happening. And so money that was supposed to go for advertising is actually being used for something else. And this is something that is revealed, if there is something like this going on, in those financial statements,
Most people, though, they just look at pages of numbers and they glance over it, not really understanding what's there.
Or they scrutinize it and they just don't understand it. They're not accountants. They've never read a profit loss or balance sheet. So my advice is you could bring in a CPA, your accountant on board, but ask the questions. Look at what the franchise is. If they are emerging, are they reinvesting everything back? Is there debt because they've invested in so many different things to really leverage and go national with the brand? If they're more established, what do the financials look like? Are they losing money every year? Is it sustainable? You as the franchisee or a prospective franchisee have the right to ask every question. You're going to be speaking with the development manager. Talk to me about this. Why are you showing a loss every year? Why is the balance sheet saying this when I think it should be saying why? You can have those conversations, and it is up to that development person to answer and address all those questions. You may not agree with their response and saying, well, you should only be showing a loss for 2 years where it's been 4 years, or vice versa, whatever the case may be, but it's their job to come back to you with the response. So yeah, those audited financials may only be corporate locations for an emerging brand. So you need to really double down and speak with franchisees to say, we're on the cutting edge of something big here. Is this going to be the same? Can I expect the same investment? Can I expect the same level of income as, the item 19 is going to be a financial representation. Can I expect this, or should I adjust this downward if I'm running it part-time? If I'm running it full-time, there's going to be different expenses involved. So that's where you're really going to, I think, get a lot of your due diligence, is speaking directly with the guys doing it day in, day out.
Now, in some vendor agreements out there, if you're a janitorial company and you sign up the local courthouse, for example, kind of a government contract, oftentimes in those arrangements, there will be a clause in the contract that says if there's a change of ownership on the part of the janitorial company, that they have the right to go and revisit the contract, maybe retender it or something like that. Have you ever seen a franchise agreement that gives franchisees the right to potentially opt out of the franchise if there's a change of ownership that they don't like?
I have not. Not
And
not
neither
not
have
to my
I,
yeah, not to
but
my. I'm not saying it doesn't
what
exist. I just don't. I'm not sure.
what I'm wondering is if for some of these emerging brands that are
Mm.
smaller, younger chains, I've always understood that if you want to renegotiate the McDonald's franchise agreement, you're not going to have any luck because it is the
There's
way it
yeah.
is. They've got thousands of units. It's going to be sold that way. But with these emerging brands, a prospective franchisee does have a lot more power in the negotiation to actually get some of these things changed in the agreement. And I mean, do you think that that's something that someone might want to aim for?
Yeah, with any franchise. So I'm going to answer a few things here, if this is okay. Because this is something
Sure.
we were talking about prior to recording here or going live. Is the franchise? A lot of people will say, well, the franchise agreement is written for the franchisor. It's in favor of the franchisor, and I never argue that. But I take a step back and say it's really in favor of the brand. I know that's the true way of looking at it. You don't want to have 1,000 McDonald's with everyone having a different logo and
Sure.
colors and different menu boards. It kills the brand. It kills the experience. So the brand is really trying to protect you. It's trying to, the brand is trying to protect itself, the franchisor, so that everyone is doing business the same way. On occasion, can you negotiate anything in a franchise agreement? Sure. I wouldn't go in with that intention of I'm going in to really, redline every page and change everything. Then that's really not the point of a franchise. But we've had cases where delaying the opening because someone family was expecting a baby, or there was a major life event preventing them from opening within the 6 months. Having that conversation, and not just having the conversation, getting it in writing, putting it as essentially creating an addendum, and your franchise attorney can help you with that. It's an addendum. When it comes to the marketing that I didn't get a chance to kind of respond to the marketing. Some brands know that, and from what they've seen, they know that, if someone wants to do the marketing on their own, they make it optional, then they'll try it. In many cases won't work. And then they come back and end up using the franchise company's marketing. What I have seen, and I'm not saying this is the case for a lot of brands are now kind of taking a step back to say, you know what, let's provide all these services a la carte. We've had brands. We have one brand in particular that provided all these services. They were mandatory. They took a step back and said, if you want to use our marketing, great. This is the cost. This is what we think we could do for you, and these are the benefits, including a call center, including bookkeeping services, even an employment or a recruitment service where they'll help you find your contractors as well as your employees. So it's an internal division. Usually it's at the corporate office. It's a physical location, and they will allow you. I'm not saying this is the case for every brand, but trends in franchising, one of them being marketing, as we discussed. Yeah.
What you're saying is that the franchisors are subject to the market forces of competition. I mean, some of them are trying to adapt and mold themselves to be more appealing to prospective franchisees, obviously by creating these different kinds of scenarios that people can participate in. What earlier in the conversation when we first began with this whole ethical franchising thing, I'm wondering too if there may not be sometimes cases where a franchise organization is really trying to live up to these 6 points from the article about how to do a great job being ethical franchise,
Right.
but maybe they have a salesperson or a development person that's a commission-driven individual that may have a temptation or a reason to kind of choose the wrong person because they really need to make a sale. Like, have you seen that kind of thing where maybe there's been a misalignment of incentives between the organization and the individual that's kind of trying to find these potential franchisees?
Well, that's a great question. So part of it is it's the third stage. It's the discovery day. At the end of the day, regardless of the development person, whether they be commission based, non-commission, however they're compensated, they are meeting with the founders, and it may be the CEO, CO, CFO. The whole C-suite is actually meeting with you. For the most part, it's in person. Since COVID, there have been a lot of discovery days that have gone virtual. We have a few brands. Aaron Harper from Rolling Suds, he's on quite a few though. The CEO is on quite a few of the calls. They just they omitted the discovery day, or I'm not even sure if they had
What does Rolling Suds do? What kind of business is that?
power washing. They do
Okay.
power washing. They use a lot of technology, drone technology, and things like that. So they power wash anything. So he's on. So the founder is going to be, or the CEO is going to be on multiple calls. And if they like you, and if you've made it that far along, they will extend the awarding a territory or two, or however many territories you're looking at. So really it comes down to, number one, will you don't just buy the franchise, you're awarded. So will the group award you? And typically if you've made it that far, there's a higher chance that you will get approved, unless something changes drastically. Your partner decides, they decide not to be involved in the business. And now they have to kind of say, well, we approved you for 10 territories. You got to knock it to 5. That's an easy fix. But ultimately, it is up to that individual to have the final say, to make sure they have done those 3 phases of due diligence, spoken with the franchise attorney, spoken with the funding company, as well as the CPA. But ultimately, it is not up to the development person. It is up to the founders and the C-suite, as well as that individual. So yes, are certain people maybe a little bit more excited, a little bit more aggressive in how they're present? Absolutely. That's why you have the 3 phases, the speaking with the franchisees. Speaking with the franchisees, they're not getting compensated, to my knowledge. They're doing the calls. They cycle them, so they're not spending 40 hours a week doing what they call discovery calls and things like that. So they'll have different people kind of doing the calls. They'll even record the calls for you to watch later. If, like with me, I had a long commute into New York City, so I used to watch some of the calls in the evening. So, but ultimately, yeah, you have, the decision's on you. You need to do your due diligence. You should not skimp on it. A major red flag, and this is a whole nother topic, but a major red flag from a franchisor is if you have call number 1, they don't know you, it's just the first call, and they're inviting you to a discovery day. To me, that is a red flag. Some people may disagree.
They're speaking with commission breath. They're very eager to make a sale.
And there's a difference, if they're saying, you can come to discovery next week. Well, it's too soon. We're not even sure it's a good fit, because typically what happens is you visit and then you're awarded. So you're nowhere near making that decision. In other cases, we're, December 9th today, our next discovery, just to put it on your calendar, is in February. We're not inviting you today, but this is maybe something, if you have a job, you can put that on the calendar. That's a different story. But yes, if they're inviting you right away, there's no way the franchisor knows you're a good fit. unless they personally know you from somewhere else on that first phone call.
Can you explain what a franchise owners association is? And then I want to get into a little bit about what the presence of one may or may not indicate.
I mean, there are groups of franchisees that get together. So maybe I'm not certain, or maybe they're called different things. But sometimes franchise owners will have groups within the brand itself.
Mm,
There's obviously groups on Facebook and things where people kind of share knowledge in the service space. So it would be an association around service based brands. So you may have a painting, a cleaning, a mosquito spraying, and then within the brand itself, you may have groups that get together. Some of the brands, as far as kind of the trends, have put together dashboards where you can compare yourself to each and every franchise owner in the system. You get a lot of value if there's multiple brands under their parent umbrella, and that's not a way to say, well, I'm the best, and I'm ranked 1 and you're ranked 50. But it's really to say, you're closing at 50%, we're at 30. What changes? Can my salesperson meet with your salesperson? So it's really that benefit you're getting from the franchise systems that have a nice, amount of franchisees that they can go back and ask for advice. So they're working with the franchisor for support, but now they're also sitting down and speaking with the franchisees. So I don't know if it's considered necessarily an association, but these groups are put in place within the brand.
yeah, what you're talking about is like benchmarking, and I think the ability to benchmark against other operators is got to be one of the fundamental advantages of being in a franchise. And if you don't see that in a franchise opportunity, it's probably something you should be going to look for, because having an idea of how your operation compares with other people, I think, is critical. But I've had I've had dealings with franchise owners associations before, and from my experience, which is with less than 8 organizations, so it's not comprehensive.
Right.
But they either come about from one of two ways: either franchisees feel like that they are disenfranchised in some way, like they feel like they're being taken advantage of, and they bind together to create an association so that they can kind of have a collective voice
Mhm.
to dispute, argue, or try to resolve issues with the franchisor. Or what I've seen from some newer franchises is that the franchisor themselves will create the FOA right from the get go to make sure that there is some kind of representational structure or voice to represent the franchisees. I think that if anyone is looking at a franchise opportunity, in addition to calling up franchisees that are in the FTD, if there is a franchise owners association, you should definitely speak to some of the people that are in the executive of that association, who will almost certainly likely be other franchisees as well. But you can get an idea about
Mhm.
the background of why that exists. I know uh, 3 of them that I dealt with in particular were reactionarily created because of issues with
Okay.
franchisors changing hands in particular, and the new owners wanting to do different things. So that's something to look for. It seems like a lot of what we're talking about here today is kind of emerging franchise versus established brand. And so if we know that the emerging businesses maybe have a little more unknown around them, uh, and the bigger ones are kind of more established with a greater track record, more unit holders, et cetera, um, are we really just talking about sort of a risk reward opportunity spectrum here, where the younger emerging brand, maybe there are more risks to it, but like, as you said before, there's going to be more open territories,
Right.
more opportunity to plant your flag, versus and I mentioned the name McDonald's before. If you want to buy a McDonald's, you may have to move, because the opportunity for where you can find one might be quite a bit limited, versus one of these emerging brands.
Yeah, I mean that's really it. The emerging brand may be in a business, and may be in the window covering business, the flooring business. There are plenty of brands in the franchising world that offer similar types of services. It just may be that you've narrowed down, this is the perfect fit via the investment, via the role, and the opportunity in your market. It's just that particular brand, you have to drive an hour down the road in order to start servicing the location. Do you want to go with an emerging brand that offers the same service, less track record? I always say you got to look at the industry itself, but the opportunity is essentially first dibs on the territory. So that's something you have to be comfortable with. I always talk about the emerging versus established. Sometimes the perfect brands just, they're not available. And, you have to kind of make that decision. Do we look at something else more established, or you take a little bit more risk on an emerging brand with less track record and rely on the feedback from the franchisees, and knowing that, you can kind of corner your home market where you have all your connections and things like that. Part of what you were saying before with, franchisees and kind of, getting together and starting the associations. One of the other brands we work with, they have, I believe it's a Wednesday afternoon call. It's an open forum. Any franchisee in the system joins with the founders of the business, not just the C-suite, the actual founders of the business, and they give feedback, and they look for consistencies and feedback. Marketing isn't good. Well, 100 franchisees, it's working for majority. Maybe that individual isn't implementing the marketing, or maybe it is, and they need to replace that vendor, or, they brought it in-house, so they have to make some tweaks. So they never say, we understand and know everything. They're always looking to adjust. So not every brand does this, but I know of brands that do a weekly call, and it's just an open forum. And it's not to go on and complain, but just say, hey, what's working? Because we also need that feedback is just as important, but also what isn't working. And sometimes it is a minor tweak. Maybe it's just, leads are great, but it's not number of leads. It's the quality of leads that has been dropping. So we need to work on changing certain keywords, or maybe it's something in a specific market. So again, this is something you can ask if you're doing the research on your own. How open is the franchisor to feedback? The $5 footlong was created by a Subway franchisee. The filet of fish, McDonald's franchisee. I wouldn't go in with the intention of bringing all your ideas for the franchisor to take day one, but it could be something down the road where maybe they make an adjustment to the service offering or to the product. So that would be something.
You know what? The McFlurry was invented right here in New Brunswick by a McDonald's franchisee who lost his general manager to a Dairy Queen.
Oh, wow.
And said, I need a product. I need a product to compete with those guys. And they found a vendor to create, that had a machine, like some kind of milkshake machine, and they invented the McFlurry, and it was successful. So it rolled out.
So there you go. I'm gonna add that to my mix of examples. So
I've got a few comments and things from people here in the audience. So Victor said this was back when I was talking about the franchisor that I had dealt with, who was basically taking money from everyone. Victor says the prospect of quick growth is too tempting for some franchisors, and they failed to build a solid foundation. I would argue that the temptation to quick growth can happen to anyone in any business. If somebody is lined up and you potentially can take some money from them, there are many business owners who will do that without fully considering whether they can deliver in a successful way for that customer. So I think it's a risk here of franchisors, but I don't think it's limited to them. I think it can be from anyone.
Can I add to that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure.
One thing I want to add is that also you have to look at it how the franchisor makes money. So the way I would respond is the franchisor is not making a ton of money on the sale. They are making their money on what? The royalty. So,
their ongoing payments forever. Yeah.
That's what they're getting. So yeah, it may be a 5-10% royalty. So they don't make a lot on the franchise fee because they're reinvesting and getting you up and running, the training and things like that. So really where they're making their money is the ongoing royalty. So, but yes, it's always going to be a risk, right?
Yeah. Victor goes on to say it seems extreme for a franchisor to require franchisees to commit to an open-ended agreement to buy unspecified services in the future. Certainly a case of let the buyer beware. And yeah, this is why Giuseppe here is saying you've got to investigate that FDD and understand the agreement and do your due diligence. And here's why, not to disparage franchise attorneys, but what I have seen happen in the past is people will go to a franchise attorney with an agreement and say, does this agreement look okay? And the franchise attorney will look at it and say, yep, this is just like every other one I've seen. But when you ask an experienced business person to read it, they can bring up some things and say, hey, do you know that this says that in this instance, this is going to happen? Like there's just certain business things that really anyone can understand from reading the agreement. And I would encourage any prospective franchisee, read the thing on your own
100%
with sticky notes, write your questions down. And then when you meet with your franchise attorney, you can go through it with them and say, now, what exactly does this mean? And what exactly does this mean? For example, I've seen plenty of franchise agreements that say that the goodwill derived in the business from the branding is the property of the franchisor, which then leads me to wonder, well, does that mean then that if they want to buy you out at some point in the future, that they can limit their offer to the value of your inventory and equipment or something like that, right? And I don't know, but that's the question I
That's a
would
very no,
ask
that
when
that's a
I
very
see a
good point.
comment like that.
Very good point. And to your point, we had one of our most popular shows. We've done over 200 shows. It was Mr. Barnett himself on how to sell my business. It's not about, well, I'm just going to hire a business broker and sell it. You need to go back, and this is not hidden. This is in the FDD that you have in hand. And number one, you're reading it twice is my recommendation before
Mm.
hiring the franchise attorney, which is done at the very end of the process. You're not hiring for a review for every single agreement. You want to kind of narrow it down to the last one, but really figuring out, how do I sell it? Does the franchisor have first dibs and they give me a 3x multiple or whatever that looks like? Am I able, or if the franchisor can help me sell it, what are those costs? Can I use a broker? Can I use both? That's the first question I asked when I bought my franchise. How do I sell it? Franchisor looked at me with a kind of like, oh my gosh, why did I allow this person to buy the franchise? But it was true. How do I sell it? What are the multiples? And that's a whole nother conversation. And I would encourage everyone to watch our episode. But figuring out from day one, every franchise, or don't look at it as an industry. Every franchise company does things differently. So find out exactly how to sell it, what your role is in the business. Don't assume one mosquito spraying company is going to be exactly the same compared to the next.
I've got another interesting question here from Deman. Deman wants to know about hiring someone to manage the business. So he says, I am looking for a franchise that allows me as an owner to hire a manager and be more passive. Do these franchises exist? And if so, is it possible to put that in writing? So, and I know there's a variation on philosophies here. I'll let you speak to that point.
Yeah, so black and white, certain franchise will and will not allow that. So we can call it semi-passive, semi-absentee, executive model. The list goes on. At the end of the day, certain brands will, number one, require you to be full-time as an owner operator. That's who they're looking for. Maybe 6 to 12 months in the business before hiring a GM. Others will allow you to hire a general manager. This is not a set it and forget. You hire the GM and you go to work. It does not work that way. That's a common misconception in franchising. I tell that to everyone that I work with that wants to do that. You need to figure out, number one, the franchisor, they're going to provide certain training, kind of like a train the trainer. I always recommend going to training with your general manager. And equally as important as the support from the franchisor, you need to be crystal clear on the role and delegate to that GM accordingly. If you have a government job and you cannot get on the phone 9 to 5, you're available at starting at 5:01 p.m. Eastern every single day. And these are the things and decisions you can make so that you don't become a bottleneck in the business. So yes, it can be done. What's going to happen is it's going to increase your investment because now you have an additional employee. So that item 7, which is typically franchise fee and everything you need for the first 90 days or so. And they'll kind of give you a low and a high. You're going to be on the high, maybe greater, depending on what you're paying that general manager. But it can absolutely be done, but not every franchisor allows it.
Yeah, and I've actually seen franchisors, these long-lived large franchisors, kind of change their philosophies over the course of time. I'm thinking of one restaurant franchise in particular that I'm pretty familiar with. I know some of the franchisee who's an owner in the system, and they were back 30 years ago. They were doing territory franchises, and that's when this family got involved. And so they have a territory that allows them to have as many units as they want in their territory.
Okay.
But then the franchisor changed to a different model where they started to sell individual units,
Mhm.
and they became much more uh, friendly towards the one-off owner operator with the owner in the unit. And then over the course of time, they then changed their philosophy again, where now they don't want those one-off owner operators. They prefer to have owners that have like 3 to 5 units and can take advantage of centralized commissary backend, to help with some of the processes and things like that. And so over the course of several decades, the franchisor's philosophy on how they like to see them run has changed. And again, nothing is static. I think is the key here. And whatever franchise, if you decide to get into a franchise business, whatever franchise you get into, you can expect that that franchisor is going to bring about new and different ways of doing business over the course of time, because they're going to try to respond to how things are changing in the market. And that research and leadership is kind of part of what you're paying for, right?
Absolutely. And these emerging brands, they're growing, they're evolving. So yes, in the beginning it may be full-time only, and then they put together a train the trainer program. They put together additional structures in place like turnkey marketing and call center, where you don't even need someone in the office to pick up the phones, and allow future franchisees to become run the business part-time. Absolutely. So we it's an evolving thing. It's via feedback. It's via money being reinvested. Some of the PE firms come in and say, you know what, we have an infrastructure we can put in place. It's plug and play. They don't have to worry about the bookkeeping, the marketing, and the call center. It's all done via the AI they installed in the CRM. We've seen that quite a bit. So it's an evolving thing. We've seen franchisors. So another thing is, when you're talking with the founders, the C-suite, the captain of the ship, where's the ship going? We have franchisors. I'm not going to name names, but out of Canada, and the weather is they were doing outside work and limiting their their services for 6 months a year, went inside the home with their product. So we had a brand based out of Canada start with one service offering, and now has 9. So part of the conversations is, what are you doing growth wise to help the franchisee become more profitable? And in that particular situation, there were franchisees doing well with one service offering. They now have 9. Those franchisees have to now take a step back to say, I got 9 offerings. Maybe I don't want to buy another franchise or another territory. I could do pretty well now that I have 8 additional revenue streams. So these are questions to ask the franchisor. Some may say there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike. They can't necessarily share it. Some will be a little bit more open to it. But again, this is part of the due diligence process and asking those questions.
So if someone is curious in learning more about potential franchise brands that they might resonate with, how can they reach out and talk with you, Giuseppe?
Go right to my website. It's my initials, GG, the franchise guide. So GUIDE. So GG, the franchise guide.com. We have a free book that we're giving out. There's a workshop on there if you're more visual. And we have 215 plus podcasts. Mr. Barnett's been on about 3 or 4 of them. I think it's been 4 actually, where we talk about every topic from exit strategy to semi-absentee.
One more and I get the jacket, right?
Yes, the SNL jacket. I think so. I got, or the robe. I got to get you the robe. So, but it's what I will tell everyone listening in is, it's if you're thinking about a franchise, take a look at the site. There's plenty of resources. We've done shows on who's a good fit for a franchise. You got to be able to follow a system. You got to have some money to invest in this. This is a business, regardless if it's a franchise or not. You have to be open to, being able to follow the system. But, at the end of the day, this is not passive ownership. This is not, I invest in REITs and I invest in, I have some real estate syndication investments where I get a monthly report and that's really it. This is not what franchising is. Franchising is going to be active involvement. And I want to clear that, because it is not this whole, let me just buy it and then disappear.
Hey, you want to know something?
What's that?
We got a question on Instagram. I just happened to look
nice.
over.
Okay.
and thanks, Cousin Joe. So Cousin Joe asks, is there a specific industry that is better for more semi-passive franchising?
An industry that's better. Well, we've seen it both in brick. So we categorize brick and mortar and home-based service businesses. I wouldn't say there's an industry. There's been plenty in the home services business because they were able to streamline. So that's an area. Boutique fitness has been another one. Health and wellness has been another. Others like anything with medical care is typically going to require you to be full-time in the business. Anything semi-absentee or executive model could be run either full-time or part-time, to be clear. But anything that that they have the support in place to help you make the business semi-absentee, home service, mosquito spraying, painting, roofing, we've seen semi-absentee, and then fitness and wellness, anti-aging concepts, we've seen being able to run part-time as well.
I would warn everyone, though, if you intend to own any kind of business in a semi-absentee fashion, you really should have amongst your skill sets the ability to be good at hiring, because you're going to need to hire some good people and delegate proper authority and trust that you've hired the right people to do what they're supposed to be doing all day long. So that definitely is a skill that you might want to think about before you do something like that. And of course, don't forget franchise warnings. Book of mine that came out years ago about franchises. I know Giuseppe's read it. If
I have.
you're thinking about a franchise, pick it up on Amazon. And with that, I think we're done here. Unless there's anything else you want to add here at the
Now,
end.
yeah, just with a franchise, if you want some advice and not ready to work together or jump on a call, just think about your skill sets. Think about what the ideal business looks like. What are you doing in the business? Are you selling? Are you in your pajamas working from home? Are you going to a brick and mortar location? Do you like lots of employees? Do you prefer a smaller amount? Do you prefer contractors versus W-2 employees? Forget about the brands. The brands are not important at this point. It's really figuring out what's the ideal fit for you, figuring out your financials, because maybe you had the perfect kind of business characteristics, but not the money. So I help everyone along that process, but figure out what the ideal business looks like. It may or may not be a franchise, believe it or not. And then starting from there and then kind of working in reverse. And I truly believe for people that are a good fit for a franchise, there's a brand out there, but you have to kind of think outside the box and not look for food. It may be, water and smoke restoration. It may be dog waste removal. You'll be surprised what's out there.
Awesome. All right, Giuseppe, thank you. And for everyone who's tuned in,
Thank you.
please give us a like on there. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps the algorithm. And if you could share onto another social media platform or leave a comment down below on YouTube or whatever platform you're watching, it really does help demonstrate that the content is good. And I appreciate the fact that you joined us here today or have taken the time to watch the recording. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.